had no distinct physical features except for its humanoid silhouette. That was very slender. Its upper body was leaning over the bed, and its face was staring directly down at me. I felt it was trying to scare me or leech off of my energy, and that this was an actual being that I was coming face to face with. A shadow being. Best way I could describe it, within just maybe a foot of my face, just staring down at me.
Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast, a testimonial archive documenting firsthand experiences that challenge the rigid mainstream understanding of reality. Each episode focuses on the raw events of a single experience, when it happened, where it occurred, and what was perceived, step by step, with as much sensory detail as possible. Worldviews, theories, and interpretations are intentionally set aside so the experience can speak for itself. I'm your host, CJ Hazley. Grounded and logical, yet I've had anomalous and mystical experiences that I cannot deny the reality of. From seeing UFOs and advanced technologies to psychic experiences like telepathy, precognition, and psychokinesis and more, I've seen firsthand that reality is much more complex than what we're conditioned to believe, and I'm not the only one. That's why my mission is to build an archive of firsthand testimony for curious minds, experiencers, and future researchers alike. These are real people sharing real experiences that don't fit the mainstream view of what's possible, and their stories deserve to be taken seriously and documented carefully. Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast. Let's dive in. All right. Welcome back, Mark. You have another experience to share with us today. And how would you classify this specific experience?
Thank you, CJ, for having me back. And yes, I would like to share another related experience. And this experience, I would also classify it as a sleep paralysis experience, but it goes one step further. It also goes into an astral projection experience, and I believe an encounter with some sort of entity or interdimensional being.
All right. And when did this experience occur?
This experience occurred several years ago now, but as I think back on it, the exact year was 2018. I remember it was that exact year because I was kind of going through something at the time. We don't need to get really into everything, but I think that kind of preceded the experience and perhaps caused it to happen. Yeah.
And this happened during the night, correct?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. I do remember it was very dark out, so it did happen during the night or in the wee hours of the morning.
And about how long did this specific experience last?
This specific experience lasted, I would say, around 2 or 3 minutes. It was sort of the same as the same amount of time as the first experience that I described, relatively speaking. So it wasn't too long, but it still had a very profound effect on me.
And did time feel distorted anyway? Sped up, slowed down?
I have never thought about that. Not to my knowledge, did time ever feel sped up or slowed down. Sometimes time is a bit different when you're working in these astral realms. So there's really no way of knowing if there was any sort of time differential between the astral realm that I believe I was in and the physical realm. But to me, there is no noticeable time difference.
Okay. So we'll move into where. Where were you physically located?
I was physically located at my house. or I should say my apartment complex where I was renting at the time, and this was in, specifically Fort Mill, South Carolina.
Okay.
I think the first experience I described, I was in Pennsylvania and my university. Now, fast forward a few years, I was at my apartment in South Carolina, but still in the greater Charlotte metropolitan area.
And then for the sake of classification purposes, were you under the influence of any psychedelics, drugs, or alcohol?
Natural DN.
And then were you alone?
I was, I was thinking about this earlier. I'm almost certain I was with my now wife, but she was my girlfriend at the time. I'm almost certain that she was with me sleeping over. We may have been, that was the same year she was starting to move in with me. So I believe she was with me.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so potentially someone was
Yeah, I would say, yeah, probably 90% sure that she was with me at that time.
okay. And then describe the environment of the room.
Well, it was kind of like your normal human bedroom. You have a bed where people sleep, and I was in that bed. And so there's a
Lighting
bed.
wise.
We were against the wall. The bed was against the wall. To the right was my nightstand, and then there was a closet and the far wall, which the bed was not connected to. To the left was my wife. I was on the right side of the bed. To the left was another nightstand and a window. And yeah, just sort of a normal square bedroom.
What about the lighting though?
Oh, the lighting was dark, dim. It was dim, not totally dark, but it was dim lighting. Yeah.
Okay. And then since you said this was a astral projection slash sleep paralysis experience, so I'm assuming you are uh sleeping at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I chose to talk about this one as well because it interrelates with the first experience I talked about, in which it's kind of difficult to define whether I was completely awake or not. I certainly was lucid when this experience happened. I did not seem to be sleeping in the traditional sense, at least when this experience happened. Actually, I think I was asleep and then I was in the middle of waking up. So maybe still half asleep. Yeah.
Okay. All right, and now we'll move into what, and we'll walk through the experience from beginning to end as you recall it in as much detail as you can recall.
Okay. So the what? I was sleeping with my wife, as I just described. I, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I wasn't in the best mental state at the time. Just going through some anxiety issues and I was having some trouble sleeping at the time as well. And perhaps we don't have to go too deeply into this, but perhaps this is what attracted this experience in the first place. But when I awoke that morning, it was dim lighting, and I saw directly in front of me a being composed purely of shadow, a shadow person, as
And when you
many.
say awoke, you mean like you at least felt like you were opening your physical eyes?
Yes, I felt like I was opening my eyes, like
Okay.
just opening my physical eyes upward in the upward direction,
Mhm.
not to the side, like in my first experience. I was just on my back and I opened my eyes, and it may have been in the very early morning, like I described. And but the lighting was dim still, and I saw a shadow person directly in front of me. When I say directly in front of me, I mean that the face of this shadow being was maybe as close as within a foot, within 1 or 2 feet, but it was leaning over me and it was staring directly at me. And it actually took a little bit of time for my mental processes to adjust and to realize what I was actually looking at, which was this long, slender, sort of like Slender Man, like shadow person that was humanoid, but had no distinct physical features except for its humanoid silhouette that was very slender, in which it did seem to have legs, a torso, and then its upper body was leaning over the bed and its face was staring directly down at me, maybe like a foot away. And the face was composed just of shadow, no distinct facial features, except that this thing was a shadow person. It also had arms, but yeah,
So could you see, like, did it have, like, a texture to its skin or, like, anything like that?
man, I mean, it's almost 8 years ago now that this happened. It's hard to go back in time and try to. I should have jotted it down when it happened. Now it's just in my memory, but I did
Okay.
not notice any distinct features on it besides it being a huge menacing shadow being.
I mean,
Oh,
that's enough. I just, wanted to probe for more.
yeah.
So, this time when you woke up, did you feel anything ominous? Or did you just wake up and you thought it was normal, but there's a
Yeah,
entity?
we could get into the feelings. Like I said, I probably wasn't going through I didn't have the best mental state in the first place at that time. Just was going through some personal stuff. But when I did when I awoke, I what did feel an ominous feeling. I specifically, and I was kind of wise, I guess, to the astral realm at that point. I had had other experiences before this, and I specifically had the feeling that there was a being here, and without going into too much interpretation, I felt it was trying to scare me or leech off of my energy, and that this was an actual being that I was coming face to face with. And it was very ominous and menacing. I did not have a good feeling from it.
That makes sense. And, how did it proceed from there?
So I find myself face to face with a shadow being. Best way I could describe it, within just maybe a foot of my face, just staring down at me. So some people might ask themselves, how would they react if they found themselves in this position? I would have thought, as weird as this sounds, that I would have been scared just by describing it. However, perhaps this was just simply masking my fright, but I decided, instead of being scared, I'm going to be angry at this thing. I don't want it to be here. I don't want it to be leeching off my energy. I want this thing out, and I'm just angry at it. So I get up, and what's very strange, from having many actually astral projection experiences, sometimes you can't even tell if you're in your physical body or if you're in an astral body or in sort of a different state of frequency. I realized that I was out of my body, whereas before I did not have that realization. Only when began to get up did I realize that I was already in my astral body, or somehow I had tuned into my astral body, and I got up out of my bed in my astral body. The environment was still the same, my bedroom, or at least sort of an astral dimension or astral replica of my bedroom. I got out of my body with anger in my astral body. When you're in your astral body, don't feel there's just a feel you don't feel as dense or weighed down really. And I just remember feeling, because I've had experiences like this before, that I cannot give in to fear. This thing wants me to be afraid, and I have to own my own power. By that time, I had already been on my spiritual path. And so when
And
I
so you're
got
like
up,
walking yourself through this in like the moment to a degree, or
yes. Well, I guess you could say, all this was happening in
very
this
quickly.
only a few seconds, but I'm like,
Right.
I just remember thinking, I can't be afraid. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid. Don't be afraid. Face the shadow. Face the shadow. Sort of reminds me of that book by Nira Isley, Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. So that was kind of my mentality. I was facing my own shadow in my personal life at that time, and perhaps this was sort of a manifestation, but it did feel like its own, separate entity, and that I was coming face to face with, that was trying to feed off me. And when I was getting up, somehow I realized I was out of my body. I was in my astral body. That was a amazing realization when that happens. And this thing backed away. And to remember all details is a bit difficult, but it did back away. And then at some point, when it was backing away, I had this realization, just this intuitive feeling that I was a being of light, and I could emanate this light. I could radiate and even like shoot light at this thing. And that was a very empowering realization. So I practice this now. When I practice Qigong, I sort of gather my energy into my solar plexus or chest or solar plexus area. And I just like that, I pushed out light at this thing. I kid you not. I just pushed out light, and it started to flee away. So, and I visibly saw the manifestation of this action of pushing out light. There was a flash of light, and at first it went into the corner. So I probably did this around a few times, just pushing out light action. I literally was chasing it around my bedroom. in the
So like pushing light out from like your hands or like your whole
Yeah, I
astral
felt
body.
like it was radiating from my core, and I was pushing with my hands. Yes,
Okay.
that was the action. And yeah, I think it went into like more of the back left corner of my room, and I was following it. It was very cool. I pushed out light again at this shadow being, and I specifically remember now we were on the other side of the bed, because I remember this happened. And then after that, it went sort of like a wispy, imagine how like sort of Voldemort travels in Harry Potter, almost like a wispy thing. And it went underneath my bed, which is kind of creepy. But finally, like for like a third time or so, I did this thing where I kneeled down and I pushed out lights under my bed while in the astral plane, and I saw this thing just completely flee. It fled up and it went through the ceiling. I saw this visually, and then it was gone, and I felt like a total badass. So,
I bet you did. Bet you did.
yeah, that's the gist of the experience. I'm trying to remember any details. I mean, we could always get into the interpretation of what that was, but, that was the gist of the experience. And, I felt changed after that, like I really could conquer my own shadows, and, I think I attracted this experience for a reason, but, in terms of the experience itself, yeah, just seeing a shadow being directly over me. I, went out of my body into the astral, and I started pushing out light at this thing. Maybe 3 or 4 times I did this. I just remember going out around the room, pushing out light, just, and I saw the light actually just coming out, and it went under my bed, and then it went up, through the ceiling.
And whenever it left, like, you felt like it was gone for good, like it was fleeing.
Yeah, I felt like it was fleeing because it didn't get the desired reaction because I didn't get scared of it in
Right.
that moment.
There's easier food somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I felt like, oh, I first saw it, I'm like, "Oh, man, this thing's trying to leech off my energy." Like, I was not in a good headspace, like, that's probably why, I can't let this thing do this to me. Like, that's honestly, like, what I was thinking, and, yeah, so I didn't get scared, and it didn't have the desired reaction. I got kind of angry at it instead, but then I became sort of empowered and realized that I'm the one with all the power, and, I'm the being of light, the light source that this thing wants to feed off of.
And here we'll tell the audience, since we've already told them who you are in the previous one, we'll just do like a real highlight version, and then we'll move on to the how and why.
So, do you want me to start? I mean, I,
Yeah, just a highlight.
yeah, who I am. My name is Mark Sabbas. I was born and raised in Westchester County, New York. My social security number is no. I was kind of. You want every detail of my life? Well, I don't know, but
How old were you when this experience happened?
I was born 1992. This was 2018, I believe. 26 years old. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, I was sort of having a background in studying philosophy and also, math and science as well. And, y- um, but I've been very into meditation and psychic experiences for a while. I've been trained in remote viewing. I've had trained myself how to lucid dream and astral project. This has led to many, many of these experiences, not just with shadow beings. There's also been experiences with positive beings, I consider to be positive beings as well. Maybe we'll get one of those, but
Right.
yeah,
Cool.
and so just in terms of who I am, yeah, I'm just still trying to figure that out sometimes. I'm just trying to, live the best version of my life I can on this planet while realizing that this version of myself is just part of a much greater soul, multidimensional soul entity that I'm currently trying to probe and awaken to, if that sounds philosophical enough. But to ground it in this reality, I'm an author. I love to write about these experiences. I've had a blog where I've actually written about some of these astral projection experiences, nothingtodoubt.org. I don't really write as many articles there anymore, but now it sort of doubles as my author website. I also published a novel that has won some awards, like Indie Awards, which is pretty cool. It's called The Monarchs. If anyone is interested, it's truth and fiction about psychic
I'm
experience.
interested. I still need to check that out.
Yeah, yeah. It's about a character who has advanced telekinetic abilities, who's tested at this facility. at first. And yeah, and well, I do have a day job, but on the side, I'm also a mentor for the Aramis Creative Learning Center, which is founded by Sherry Divban. Some people might recognize her. And we are teaching all sorts of really cool classes to children and adults as well about all sorts of topics. Not necessarily all metaphysical, but all sorts of cool topics, anything you could think of, really. And if anyone wants to check that out, it's at aramiscreativelearning. It's all online, virtual right now, but Sherry does want to open a physical center. So yeah, I guess you could say, although I don't like to label myself anything, I'm just having a human experience. But I'm a teacher, I'm a writer. And yeah, just here for the ride, really. Just trying to help out in this crazy time we live in.
And I forgot this is also part of the Who section. Prior similar experiences, we've already covered one, but there's a 8-year, like, gap between those 2 experiences, huh? Did you have many in that 8-year gap? You said you were,
Yeah,
more accustomed to astral projection by this point?
yeah. Actually, I didn't even realize that there was that big of a gap between those two experiences. But yeah, that specific experience happened in 2018. But within that gap, I did have many other astral projection experiences as well. Yeah, within that gap, um, I was still learning a lucid dream, having lots of lucid dream experiences. I've had a lot of sleep paralysis experiences, and that automatically led into as well astral projection experiences. Some of these terms, like lucid dreaming, astral projection, some of them can be sort of interchangeable. It's not really the terms that's so important, it's the experiences. Let's just say I've had a lot of lucid experiences on other realms, not always physical. And um, I was sort of awakening throughout that whole time to, psychic abilities. I was interested in remote viewing. I eventually was trained a few years ago by the Farsight Institute by one of their instructors in remote viewing, which is pretty cool. And astral projection, of course. I've had other experiences where I've projected to other realms, or or I've projected into what seemed like an astral dimension of this realm, if that makes sense. So I've had many of those types of experiences. You know,
Did you have many more within that period of time that were kinda like those first 2 that were, like,
yeah,
encounters with, like, dark entities?
yeah. So with dark entities specifically, eventually I've had experiences with light entities, but that was later. But dark entities, yes. I remember back maybe around 2012, 2013. Well, this was back when I was still attending college, but I was back home from college. And I've had another experience where I astral projected out of my bedroom, and this was back in New York, actually, when I was home from college. I walked around, and this one was so real. There's some where I've just felt this like this is so real, like more real than real. And I
Mhm.
walked into the astral version of my bathroom, and I saw a woman, tall woman, and a little girl just staring at me. And they had completely black eyes, just like no whites at all. And they were just giving me this menacing stare. And the first thing I was just thinking, go back, go back, go back, go back. I went back into my body. I had another experience around that time with what seemed like a tiny frog being that kept on attacking me on the astral. As weird as that sounds.
Interesting.
Yeah, the black-eyed beings, that one was really, scary.
Sounds like it. That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it was dude,
Almost more so than it being a fully dark shadow entity because your guard is down because 'cause you're like, "Oh, it's a mom and her daughter," and then
yeah. Actually, I think that was 2014 now that I think about it, because I remember I was just graduated college, actually. So that was 24, yeah, and it was a woman and a little girl. I heard something in the bathroom and I looked in, and this was so real, man. Like, some of these experiences are just, like, crazy real, like, it
That sounds
almost,
horrifying.
yeah, it's just, like, totally out of body, and, yeah, the completely black eyes, they were just staring at me, and I'm like, "Oh my god, go back, go back, go back." In
I'd
terms
have
of
a hard time keeping my fortitude in that one.
yeah, I'm like, "No, I'm not messing with them. Go back, go back."
Free hugs?
A free hug, yeah. I think I wrote about that on my blog, actually. That was years ago. Yeah, there's been other ones, too many to remember, but in terms of, like, really like, sometimes you meet beings or in lucid dreams or astral realms. I think they could be anything from sort of subconscious projections of or all the way up to what seem to be, autonomous entities that could be of the dark or of the light, and I've had a few of those. In terms of shadow beings, I've had a few shadow being experiences, like, where I've actually seen them, maybe, like, 3 or 4 at this point, but I think that this experience that I described was the first time where I've seen a being composed just of yeah, just of shadow, just a shadow being. I think that this was the first time, but after
Was
that,
it the
I
first
have
time
seen
that you fought back?
the first time that I fought back.
Or was this the
Yeah,
first time that
was
you
this?
fought back?
Yes, yes. Well, it's the first time I remember, yeah, against any sort of being. Like, before that, like, yeah, I didn't fight back against those black-eyed beings. I was just like, "Go back." I'm not messing with that. But there was man, I'm trying to think back to those days when I was just beginning astral projecting. Lots of times I didn't even encounter any beings. I felt them, but I didn't physically see them. There were times when I just, astral projected to these incredible environments and it's kind of like city environments even, and was just going around interacting with these people. But, most of the time it was not never really it was not really, "Oh, this evil being that I'm encountering." It was just sort of curiosity, just trying to talk with these people, figure out if they were, like, actually, "Hey, like, are you a real person? Are you a real being? Like, who are you?" Yeah, there's endless things you could do. You could just fly around once you're lucid in a dream or in an astral realm and to experience a lot of cool things. But yeah, in terms of fighting against a shadow person that seemed to be leeching off my energy, that is the first time I remember doing that. I have felt, though, other times, of course, like the first experience I described, where there were these sort of beings trying to mess with me, but I've never seen a physical manifestation of a shadow being directly until then.
Okay. And then you've addressed your mental emotional state at the time a number of times, like, briefly. Do you want to dive more deep into that, or is it enough to just leave it at you were kind of in a dark place mentally?
Yeah, I don't want to say I was like, oh, super dark, like poor me, but I was just, not to get too deep into it, but I was just struggling with some anxiety issues at that time and insomnia issues. Like, I was having a hard time sleeping and
Okay.
going, and I think that actually led into experiences like dark experiences because maybe that place I was in where I was just yeah, having issues just quieting my mind, I guess you could say, is led into those types of it attracted that, shadow experience to me. But afterwards, I felt a lot more empowered. everyone goes through a journey where they're just trying to master themselves and conquer their minds. And that's kind of just a place I was in. There was nothing like too crazy, sad that happened to me then. Actually, it was soon after, my brother-in-law died, was murdered. So that may have factored into it. And my wife was not in a good place, but, um, yeah, that's a whole nother story. But, I know, but, um, I don't want to go too deeply into that. I just, yeah, I was also just kind of, I don't know, just, I didn't really, I was still kind of finding out who I am. I felt like sort of a misfit in this world, I guess you could say. I think many of your audience could feel the same way. I was working a job I was not so happy about. I didn't really know what I was wanted to do with my life. And then the other was there's personal stuff and just insomnia as well at that time. And yeah, all this kind of led into me not being in the best mental state at that time. Although normally I'm quite a positive person, so I don't want to make it seem like I
You
was
were in some, like, horrible, like, demented state
yeah
where, like, you're, like, crying all the time and
yeah exactly. But
nothing like that.
yeah nothing like that. No, normally I'm a positive. I like to keep things positive.
Alright, well, thank you for coming on and sharing this experience. This is where we'll end the, YouTube, part of the interview, and we'll move into the Patreon where we discuss how and why in a much more open-ended way, and just dive deep into this topic.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks for inviting me. Hope everyone enjoyed listening. And just remember, you are beings of infinite light, and you have power over and dominion over anything that's trying to mess with you. So yeah, just always remember that.
Don't give away your power,
Exactly. It was a very empowering experience for me.
right?
I'm a being of light. Just remember that you are light. You are the light.
Yeah, and that's an important note that even though you encountered a shadow entity at the end of it, I think we actually skipped over that part. How the experience, like, how you felt immediately after the experience.
Yeah. Well, I felt pretty badass. Like I was said, like I think it was meant to show me, hey, like, yeah, all this sad stuff could happen in this world, but ultimately nothing could dim your light except you, unless you give it away. And I am the one, like, we are all beings of light, divine beings. But in terms of specifically that experience, I felt, yeah, very empowered. I did feel like nothing can mess with me anymore. I felt powerful and like I'm not going to give away my energy anymore. I'm not going to give into like darker negative thoughts. I just remember feeling very powerful, like and empowered, like, oh, that was a cool experience. And I don't want those things, those shadows to, regardless of your interpretation of what it was, I don't want that to mess with me anymore. And I was just kind of like a gun ho attitude, like, yeah, I'm the one with all the power. Like I showed that motherfucker, yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting, to find out, like, what your thoughts are feeding,
yeah,
because they are always, feeding something.
exactly. Yeah. Your thoughts are creative. They're not private to other beings. And yeah, they're always feeding something. What are you going to feed? It's very important, I think, to see through your negative thought patterns in your mind. And that's kind of the experience I was going through back in 2018. I've had all these negative thought patterns. I was just trying to about myself, really. That's basically the
Mhm.
gist of it. That was just trying to clear and realize, no, I'm a perfect being of light and see through all the BS, really. And yeah, just it's important not to get so caught up in your mind. Just be here because it can't manipulate you from that love energy.
Right on. That is where we'll actually leave the, YouTube interview and move over to how and why on the Patreon side. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again later.